All right, so it's 5:30. We only have Naima Penniman here for an hour, so we are going to begin, and I'm going to introduce Naima, a little blurb, and then Naima, you're going to have to take it away from the little excerpt that you've provided me. All right, so without further ado, I'm honored to introduce our live Q&A, our honored guest here. So Naima is the co-founder and steward of the Wild Seed Community Farm and Healing Village, arts activator and performer through climbing poetry, program director and food sovereignty educator at Soulfire Farm, and healing practitioner at Harriet's Apothecary. Naima Penniman cultivates collaborations that elevate the healing of our earth, our bodies, our communities, lineages, and descendants. And you are definitely going to have to elaborate on that. So thank you so much for being here. This is awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be joining you all from Soulfire Farm here on Mohican territory, and grateful that you got to witness the storytelling and presentation of my sister Leah. And I'm excited to be here in conversation with you all and answer any questions that you may have. I know you just took in a lot of information, so thank you for the sacred gift of your attention. And I'm really heartened to know there's so many of us out here who are working in collaboration with the earth and with our communities to really bring about healing in our food system and the way that we're in relationship to our ecosystem. And yeah, so we can get into it. Thank you so much, George, for moderating and sharing the questions. And I'm really happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay. Well, we have a couple questions that have shown up in the chat. And so we have from Jay. Hi, Naima. Can you talk about how you arrived at the name Soulfire Farm and what themes you want to build upon in your future?
Sure. So Soulfire Farm began over a decade ago, and there was a period where we didn't have a name, and we actually put it out to our community who can come up with the best name, and there was prizes involved, including stuff fresh from the farm. And the contest didn't actually result in a name, but it, sometimes when you put it out there for collective brainstorming, it kind of just gets the juices flowing. And we have a lot of campfires here on the land. It's a way that we can be, outside under the sky, together on the land. And it was around a fire one night. I believe it was Jonah who had the idea about how this land supports us in really stoking the warmth and the light of our souls. There's also a song called Soulfire that y'all can check out, but that's a little bit about the name. And you heard about our mission, which is really directing our hopes for the future. We're set up both to be able to reclaim and practice our Afro-Indigenous regenerative agricultural technologies here. And as we skill up and learn those things, we also want to inspire and equip our communities. We're part of a rising and returning generation of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color farmers who are, really reclaiming dignity and agency in the food system that has been laden with a lot of trauma and oppression. And so it's part of reaching back into our history beyond that oppression to reclaim some of these practices that are also so important in being able to, with intention, like steward the earth in a way that, as opposed to contributing to climate catastrophe as industrial agriculture does, actually provides ecosystem services. And then, of course, with the bountiful harvest, this life-giving, nourishing food, making sure to get it to those in our community who need it most. And so that's the trajectory we've been on, and that's still our North Star. We just want to continue to be able to really support this growing and returning generation of aspiring growers, and to be able to really strengthen this mycelial network that we consider ourselves part of, a real movement ecosystem that includes how we return land back to Black, Indigenous, and other people of color stewards. That is also about acquiring capital to be able to make our food and land sovereignty dreams come true, providing the education access to food, and so on. And our niche is very much in the education piece. I mean, it's multi-connected, but we're really like part of a movement that's being able to support whole systems thinking towards making these changes.
Awesome. All right, we got one more from Anne. And greetings from rural Starkborough, Vermont. What do you remember about the farm school in Athol, Mass?
Oh, yes. So my sister Leah went to the farm school.
Okay.
I didn't personally, but I can speak a little bit to what I remember from that time, because we were both in high school at the time. And during our summer, Leah picked up a job at a food project. And oh, you said farm school. I'm thinking you said food project. Sorry.
You can go on both. That's cool.
I can't speak to farm school.
Okay.
We'll talk about the food project. I'll finish the mini story since I started it, because this was really pivotal for my sister, and subsequently our whole family, was having this opportunity through the food project, which helps to bring together youth from both urban and rural communities in Massachusetts to be able to grow food in community gardens and then distribute that harvest to soup kitchens and food pantries and get it out to those who needed it most. And that summer I was not involved. I went to the Art Institute of Boston, I think it was called, and I was doing summer classes in art, and that was my thing, and Lee was doing the farming thing. But I remember the inspiration and pride that Leah would have coming home, like, and having been responsible for the growth of a carrot from seed to harvest, and to be able to prepare and cook that carrot up and serve it. She had this embodied sense of like, wow, I can do something tangibly with my hands that can make a difference, which I think is so important for all of us, to feel like we can make a meaningful contribution when there's, so many problems to solve. And there's something about that process of both being in collaboration with nature and being able to provide that direct service that really stayed with Leah and inspired further learning and getting on farms. And then I was like, ooh, this is cool. And joined that Many Hands Organic Farm, was shout out in Barre, Massachusetts, is where we learned a lot by working our summers there. So yeah, shout out to the food project, and feel free to offer more in the chat about what's great with farm school too.
All right. Amazing. All right. All right. Well, that seems to be the last question that we had in the chat.
No, you may want to scroll up.
Oh, scrolling up.
We had a couple of questions, very interesting. Also, I'm checking the Q&A. Oh, yes.
Okay. And then the Q&A. Okay. Okay. There we go. Have any major changes been discussed with the current administration? Question one. And I'll leave it at that because that's a pretty multifaceted thing.
Yeah. So y'all may or may not be aware that the recent COVID relief bill that was passed successfully by the current administration includes a debt relief portion for Black farmers. So that's a huge deal. It's a $5 billion debt relief for Black farmers. And for context, the demand for debt relief comes out of the class action lawsuit that Leah mentioned in the keynote, that was filed by Black farmers against the USDA for generations of discrimination. That's the Pickford v. Glickman case that was settled in 1999. Debt relief was asked for, but not included in that. So the debt relief part was inserted in the COVID relief bill and passed. And this is a huge victory. And what would take it a step farther, because it's still partial, is the Justice for Black Farmers Act, which Senator Booker and Senator Warren wrote with input for hundreds of Black farmers. And it includes land reform, farmer training, civil rights reform. And this is legislation that Soul Fire Farm was consulted for, along with other Black farmers. And, we were able to support the writing in about being able to return acres of land to dispossessed farmers, farmer trainings, funding for historically Black colleges and universities, as well as like expanding farm credit and legal assistance to prevent further land loss from Black farmers. And then also our role was specifically in really advocating for Indigenous consultation and farm worker consultation inside of this, and really centering the voices of Black legacy farmers who have been most impacted by historical discrimination. So check out the Justice for Black Farmers Act. That is a current opportunity to reverse and correct the millions of acres of land lost within the Black farming community, and to really be able to fortify the next generation of Black farmers.
Okay, and now what can we do at the state government levels to make real change?
Yeah, so on the state level, there's work that can be done around land back, like rematriation for Indigenous communities. And then there's also on levels of towns that have institutional purchasing power, there's things that we can sign on to that commit that a certain percentage of our budget for food goes to just and sustainable practices. So that's something that's really important that we can do. And also even on like institutional levels, like if you're part of a university or a school that buys in bulk, you can sign on to the Real Meals Challenge, the Good Food Challenge. And let me actually pull up a link that I can drop for y'all in terms of the action steps. And I'll paste in here. These are, and I don't know if, let's see if everybody gets this. This link goes to our action steps that we've crowdsourced from our communities that includes the actions that we can take on the individual level on policy, both state and federal, as well as alliance building and work for reparations. I'm just thinking if there's anything else I want to highlight from that. I was mentioning the name of the institutional purchasing program. So Real Meals, Good Food Cities, or the Real Food Challenge are examples that can be on town or institution levels where you're promising a certain percentage of the dollars go to just and sustainable purchases, like including a food justice certification. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Okay, we got, what would it take and require to make the approach and philosophy with which Soul Fire Farm is growing food to be the main way we consume food? And then how does this reconcile with our need to grow food cheaper and with less time spent on farm?
That is a great question. So it is crucial that we figure out the answer to this question of how we are able to divest from an agricultural system that is literally subsidizing mechanized agriculture that involves huge externalities for the environment and for our human health, right? Like the way we grow the majority of our food is through massive monocropping, needing tractors and heavy machinery, like huge equipment, needing, chemical inputs, pesticides, fertilizers, and it is decimating the land, right? As well as the food that grows is not full of nutrition for our health because the soil doesn't have that, right? And it's also is responsible for launching anthropogenic climate change because we're taking the carbon out of the soil where it belongs and releasing it into the atmosphere as atmospheric carbon. Not to mention how much the folks who grow our food are being mistreated inside of this system. Now, what strikes me as a bitter irony that as a small, diversified, naturally grown farm, it's like we're the ones who have to jump through hoops to get a certification, to get that label of being like organic or green certified. Whereas in my mind, if the farming industries that are creating hazards for our public health and for the health of our planet and for our community members were the ones that were actually, needing to have a label or even being taxed, as opposed to what's currently happening, which is huge subsidies going to support these massive monocrop farms growing primarily soy and corn. And so I think there needs to be a policy shift for sure in terms of how we can resource small diversified horticulture farms that are using regenerative agricultural practices and doing the work of healing the soil, increasing biodiversity, calling the pollinators back, all these things that are essential for all of us, and also, you know, contributing food to those who need it most. And I think that that is a key piece, you know, being, you know, knowing that everybody's trying to figure out how, oh my God, how do we save ourselves from the climate catastrophe? That is one way, is to resource small regenerative farmers. And there are models where we can, like, with that type of support, meet the scale need of food distribution, if it wasn't for those cost barriers and the false competition of those subsidies. And then I would just add that, sorry, trying to catch my train of thought again. Shoot, my thought just flipped. There was one more thought I had about the how to support small farmers, but hopefully it'll come back and I'll tack it on. So thank you.
And Irene.
Yes, you want. So we have two more questions. I think they are related. They are both about history. Anonymous, if you don't mind, I'm going to read Megan's question first, but I think, again, because the two are really closely related. Megan is one of our professors here at Framingham State, and she shares with us that she was just teaching today about the history and current system of farm labor in the US. Students were particularly shocked by the ways in which farm labor is exempt from many of the worker protections and labor rights we have in the US. What do you think it will take to get recognition, rights, and protections for farm laborers that are so needed and overdue? And just to a hint, the other question is more about the history that your sister so eloquently talked about, and, you know, where we can find resources to really start with the history of the problem. But
yeah, thank you so much for this question.
To get the recognition, rights, and protections for farm laborers.
Absolutely. So it is pressing that we equalize all labor and wage laws so that those who are our farmer and agricultural workers have a living wage, health insurance, day of rest, overtime, workers' comp, collective bargaining rights, which are now excluded, right? And so the Fairness for Farm Workers Act of 2019 is one important piece of policy to support, and please contact your elected officials and encourage them to support that. And it's also really important that we're able to create supportive pathways for migrant and seasonal agricultural workers to become land-owning farmers, to be able to run their own businesses. And because you heard the staggering statistics, right? It's like 85% of our food is grown by folks who are Spanish-speaking seasonal workers, yet 2% of the management. So when we talk about bringing dignity to that role, those pathways to legalization for all undocumented people, pathways to citizenship for those who want it, and then being able to have, it's necessary we have more checks and balances for the wage theft and the abuse that is happening on these farms. So some of that needs to happen on a policy level, right? Like replacing the H-2A visa program with the North American Agricultural Work Visa, which would uphold the provisions of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And all the policies I'm mentioning are referenced in the action steps, so don't worry if you can't remember those that I'm saying, but those pieces I think are really essential. And then when we can support smaller and independent producers that pay a living so they can pay a living wage to farm workers is really essential as well. And in addition to, you may see like an organic label, there's also a label for workers' rights into the farm. So you can look for that label or encourage your farmer to do so, so that we're also really uplifting dignity for farm workers and agricultural producers in that. Yeah, so those are some of the things that, in terms of what it will take. And I also think it's really important that we are talking about this and educating ourselves and each other, because as you mentioned, there's many of us who are really shocked to find out, oh wait, like this is how our food gets grown. Like we're still having basically indentured servitude on our lands here in 2021. We still have penal farms, people who are incarcerated working the land for free. Like this is still going on. So it's important that we visibilize it and talk about it. And I'll share a really powerful report that came out recently in case you want to read more. And there are some suggestions about how to support in the report as well. So I'll drop that in the chat. And going back to the previous question, I remembered what I had wanted to say about this question of how do we grow enough food to feed all of us, using regenerative agriculture as opposed to the industrialized agricultural system. And part of that solution is really in how we treat the harvest that does exist. You may or may not be aware that over 50%, more than half of the food that's grown in this country ends up in the trash, in the waste stream. It actually doesn't end up in our bellies. And I believe that part of that is due to the disconnect between where our food is grown and then how far it is shipped and traveled and stocked before it even makes it to our tables, never mind once it does. And so when we set up smaller food hubs, like what we're doing here in New York in our region, we're aggregating our harvest and figuring out the distribution. When we shorten that our kind of, when you think of like a watershed, if we have like our food shed of like, this is the radius where 90% of our food comes. Yes, once in a while we got to get a tropical fruit, but like we're really eating locally. The statistics show that we're wasting so much less food. And so I think that that's another piece of it, is how we really honor the sacred harvest that is grown, and as it makes its way to us on the food supply chain.
And actually, can you kind of describe the food hub that you all like partake in, and how does that work?
Yes, I can. And I'm just going to take 1 second to share that resource that I mentioned. I think this is the one about farm workers that includes some how-tos. I'm hoping that's the right one. It also highlights the really cruel irony that those who are growing our food are among the most food insecure in our nation, which I think is something that we really need to address. Okay, and you asked about the food hub. So shout out to Corbin Hill Food Project, which is working on this in our region with markets and aggregation of the harvest. But it's a way, so let's say for a small farm like ours, we're able to grow food for our solidarity shares, which is like our CSA, and do some direct doorstep delivery. But in addition to that, we have limited facility here to like store food. We have a small walk-in cooler, and this is true for many small farms. We don't have warehouses to store our produce or extensive refrigeration. And so it's a specific local niche to have those who are really focused on this aggregation and market piece, where it's helping to gather the harvest of many farms in the region and then support in the distribution. And so Corbin Hill is is supporting doing that in the region. I'll also shout out the Freedom Food Alliance, which is specifically gathering up harvest to support folks who are incarcerated or families of folks who are incarcerated to make sure food goes out in those channels. And then there's, okay, I'm forgetting the name of it, but there's another organization that we partner with too, that any surplus food that we have beyond once we do all of our distribution, they will purchase from us at cost and then be responsible for distributing that in the local areas, both at no cost to like food pantries and other food distribution places, as well as to restaurants that are part of the program. So these are all examples of this kind of aggregation that can happen on local and regional levels to make sure the food doesn't go to waste. When we're like, oh, we fill up all our CSA boxes, we call on this organization, they'll send somebody to come and pick it up in a truck and make sure that that harvest goes out right away. And I'll try to find the name of that if you're interested.
Oh, yeah. All right. We have, oh yeah. So where can we learn more about the true history of agriculture in the US? And do you have any resources to be able to teach others with?
Yeah, so there are a number of resources on our website that I'll just drop the link in the chat. Includes articles, books, as well as some podcasts and interviews that are great places for more learning. I would recommend a book called Black Rice that talks about the specific targeting of the Mende and Wolof rice farmers in West Africa to build the multi-trillion-dollar rice industry in the Carolinas, and goes into some of the history of that agriculture. I recommend reading Fannie Lou Hamer's memoir to learn like firsthand from Fannie Lou Hamer's experience growing up as a sharecropper and then going on to found Freedom Farm in Sunflower County, Mississippi, and creating a cooperative farm with other Black farmers. What else? The Color of Food is another good book. I'd also recommend reading Yes Magazine for shorter bites, like for articles. They've done some great coverage, including some articles from Leah and others on our team about the history of racism in agriculture, as well as some really inspiring, like forward-thinking solutions around climate resilient farming and the rising generation of Black farmers who are participating in that. So those are some that I'm thinking of off the top, and if I think of more, I'll drop them in the chat.
Awesome. Okay, I loved your spoken word piece in the video. Can you talk about the connections you see between science and/or art/storytelling?
Oh yes, thanks for that question. Yeah, I live in that intersection. I'm really passionate about creativity, storytelling, art, poetry to support us in shifting culture and keeping our imaginations strong and visionary. And I feel like our creativity has a powerful role to play in strengthening our movements. I like to say that creativity is the antidote to destruction, right? It's literally the opposite of the violence and the devastation that's happening on so many levels all around us. And I feel like when we harness our creative force, it's an opportunity to really be thinking into the future. Like, we're exercising those muscles. What do we want to create? And it's also part of listening and being present to the messages around us. My biggest inspiration is the natural world. I feel like Mama Nature is constantly whispering lessons and teachings to us and to me. And so I feel like for me, when I'm in that creative zone, I feel like that's the closest to being in touch with the divine force of creation that's in all things, right? And when I'm, writing a poem, it's like, that feels like that essence of life that is in all of creation, that's teeming with this energy of like the maples that are rising with sap, or the buds that are bursting in spring, you know? And so I think there's a lot of synergy, both in terms of how we stay alive and sentient, you know, as living human beings, and then also how we can really use our voices and our mediums to be able to inspire people to action, to keep ourselves inspired, to tell the stories that often go missing or mangled in mainstream media or absent from our textbooks. Our creativity, our art is a platform for, you know, speaking those truths that need to be heard. And it's something that's available to all of us. So I invite us to all, you know, really gather up and harness those tools that are available to us to collaborate with all of creation.
Excellent. And what's your medium of choice?
So my toolkit is vast. I love writing poems and rhymes and lyrics, right? I also love painting on all scales, from small to big murals on the sides of buildings and walls. I love to dance. I love to sew and make practical things like, you know, utilitarian things that are full of beauty. And I love to make art with the food that we grow. So you name it. Those are all mediums that I really feel at home inside of.
That is amazing. Awesome. And so, folks, we need some more questions. So fill them up in the chat and the Q&A, please.
Don't be shy. I know that people out there, this is not a group of shy people.
No.
So we know who you are. Please. But I was reflecting on how everything is connected, right? You know, we started talking, of course, agriculture, but it's really, well, it's justice, social justice, it's agriculture, it's history. How do you, well, we see how you're approaching the conversation right now in this conversation, but, you know, would you have some advice for us? We work with college students. Some of us, like me, also work with, for example, high school students who are really, they want to make a difference. They really start from a social justice perspective and want to make a difference in an environmental context. But how do we help them make all these connections and make it really relevant and meaningful for them, so they learn what they need to learn to act and be change makers?
Yeah, well, I think that our educational institutions have such an important role to play in helping to illuminate these connections that touch all of our lives. And so through events like this, through the syllabuses that, you know, the professors create, through the groups on campus that are organizing, mobilizing between like faculty and student support, these are all places where we can step in to do the work of sharing the resources, the mediums, the stories, and as much as possible, really like bringing it home to how we're directly impacted or impacting these issues, I think is really helpful, and it not feeling like some far off thing over there, but, you know, when we feel a sense of agency or responsibility or ways that things are touching our personal community, I find that's when I'm most inspired to act. And I think it's our job to really be those weavers to help. You know, everything is interconnected, right? It's all like rippling out. So being able to help draw those connections to our personal lives and localities with what may be happening, you know, far away, is something that we can all kind of step into on all the platforms, whether it's through our individual conversations with people, or if we have a classroom or other platforms to be able to share.
Thank you. The message that I take is, in addition to our specific expertise, which of course is important, but probably the biggest gift that we can give to our students is to support their capacity to make connections. And
I love it. Yes.
All right, there are some very good questions coming.
All right, we have one Jerry, can you talk about how your approach to farming practices with your groups who are in different environments in upstate New York?
How we approach. Jerusha, do you mind clarifying? Do you mean, oh, for teaching that you do? Like, how do we teach the practices? Or is the key part about folks coming from different environments, like ecological environments or social environments? I just want to make sure I'm directing the answer correctly. Okay. So yeah, for context, we invite a lot of people to the land to learn with us every year. About 1,500 people come through in the course of a year, and many of those are through our week-long farming immersion programs, which is a hands-on moment to like really skill up on regenerative agricultural practices, drawing on the lineage of our Black and Indigenous ancestors. And people come from all over different types of contexts, you know, a lot from our bioregion where the environment is similar, but some come from as far as Puerto Rico or from the Southeast where it is different growing climates. So we, you know, we're conscious to share what's relevant here and what's applicable in other places. For example, like where we are, especially on this mountainside, is very cold and we have a short growing season. So we have to be thinking a lot about how to grow intensively with polycultures on our plot here and be able to extend the season using high tunnels and greenhouses. Whereas, you know, we'll let our fam from South Carolina know, you know, you don't really need to worry about growing your okra in the tunnel like we're doing it, but this is what we do here. So we use a practice we call each one teach one for our programs. And while we have like a core facilitation team that's really responsible for key pieces of learning goals that we have, we also create a lot of opportunity for us to learn from each other. And so folks who are coming from different places are sharing, you know, some of their practices and how it applies to the specific ecosystems that they're in as well. And it's been really powerful because every session, I feel our knowledge grows together and our curriculum deepens. Like we're constantly adding more ideas and resources and ways to do things. So it's a really beautiful, like living, breathing process. And to think that, you know, we're going back and reclaiming these seeds that have been passed on for generations and generations that still evolve and adapt to our unique circumstances, I think is something that's really powerful and something that is essential to our work of being in relationship to land.
All righty.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions in the Q&A. You want me to, I can read the first one.
Yeah.
Can scientific advances support sustainable farming? More specifically, how can new technology, data, internet, biotechnology support small and minority Black and brown farmers?
Yeah, that's a good question that I'm not an expert in. So I don't have too much just to say there. If you or anybody else that's tuning in wants to offer anything in the chat, I welcome it. Yeah.
And we can allow, you know, give you permission to speak, right? We can turn on, we can unmute you if you would like. Vinay, would you like to do that? Let me see if I, but maybe in the meanwhile that I'll do that. You want George to read Judy's question?
Yeah. All right. We got a geography professor here teaching about sustainability of food systems this week. Students often learn about individual actions they can take, less meat, less food waste, join CSAs, etc., without necessarily engaging with systematic solutions. What do you think are the 2 to 3 most important ways in which our students can affect systematic change? I can come in a few minutes. Okay, yeah, excellent.
Yeah, so for systems change to take place, I feel that it's so important that we're building alliances and affecting policy, and then also being engaging in resource and land transfer, I would say would be like the top three. So I shouted out some policies before, including the Fairness for Farm Workers Act, the Justice for Black Farmers Act, also encouraging the passing of HR 40, which would create a commission to study a case for reparations. These are all examples of policy, right? And I think that the alliances that we can make within community beyond just as individuals can also be really powerful. And there are folks on the front lines that have long-term commitment and strategy and expertise that are really leading the charge in these issues. And so as we really step in to support the initiatives that are already underway, whether it's being one in a number at a demonstration or signing a petition or volunteering, showing up with our bodies, I feel like this is a way that we turn our like one individual drop into something that's much bigger. And we're in a very alive time right now, right? Between what's going on with the movement for Black lives and farm worker dignity and climate change. And so there's many, many opportunities to really step in and take the lead from frontline communities. So that type of alliance building, I think, is also really huge. And yeah, and in addition, I think that the piece around reparations and rematriation is really huge, and that's something that we can expand out of our individual selves to say, oh, maybe I'm part of a family that has inherited stolen land or stolen wealth through labor, and I'm going to be the agent of change within my family to say, like, this land that has been fallow that we're not even using, like, I think we should give it back to the original stewards of this land. Tribal nations are accepting donations of land and asking for that, or turn over the title and the deed to Black farmers who need that resource. So that's another way where and I'm giving that example for part of a family, but there's also ways inside of our towns and larger communities that we can support and really normalizing that transfer of land. Reparations, often people are like, whoa, it sounds like scary and unheard of. And it's like, no, actually, we're talking about trillions of dollars of wealth that has never been wholly redistributed, and it really needs to be addressed for us to get at the bottom of a lot of these systemic issues. And so I think part of our role is to really normalize that return, not seeing it as charity or something so radical and outlandish, but really this like return of resources and redistribution of resources that we've seen only creating widening gulfs of access in our country. And so being part of that movement. And if you're interested in learning more, there's a national effort for reparations that's being coordinated by the National Food and Justice Alliance, National Black Food and Justice Alliance. And then here in our region in the Northeast, the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust is also doing people-to-people reparations. And you can check that out at nefolklandtrust.org.
Thank you, Irene. This is Vinay. I asked a question about the scientific advances, and it might be more of a reflective question. I teach food science, and we talk about GMOs and like how technology is used to optimize food production and improve nutrition. However, often one of the conflict when we talk about sciences is new knowledge and technology are often patented, and in a way, it kind of while it's used as an incentive for innovators, but it's often when how the technology is used can be very restrictive. For example, GMO, while the technology itself in science seems to be safe, but it's applied to industrial farming, and that can be very devastating for environment. So so it's a more of a reflective question. I know it's a there is no straightforward answer to this, but I'm wondering if you had within your experience with farmers and in general with partners, how the technology conversations come into play, whether GMOs or just industrial farming, where maximum output with minimum resources is a big takeaway, while there is a lot of subcontext to it, as like, you know, the commercial fertilizers and pesticides do take a lot from the resources as well, which is often not accounted for. But just wondering if what your reflection is on the technology piece and how the conversation surrounds in the small farmers.
Yeah, thank you so much for providing that additional context and reflection. I really appreciate it. I must say I'm not as versed in what those applications are, and I believe that it's really important to explore deeper. My focus has been so much on what are these you know, ancestral technologies that we have that we can apply here on the land, and teaching them on a small scale here on the farm that we steward. And we've used very little technology. You know, we're like making our beds by hand, we're spreading wood ash and compost and making our own mulches and fertilizers. So that's really my area of expertise. And I know there's really important implications, but I don't feel like I can really speak to it with much background, you know, but I'm appreciating you dropping that seed, because I do think that that is a really valuable reflection, and I appreciate you raising it.
Thank you, Naima. I'm really grateful for your presentation.
Thank you.
I think we got one more. And we have, how would you recommend starting a seed sharing program?
Ooh. So I am a new seed keeper. I'm very inspired and passionate about what I've been learning about saving and keeping and distributing seeds. I've never started a seed sharing program, but I do want to shout out True Love Seeds in Philadelphia, and they offer ancestrally and culturally important seed varieties, open pollinated vegetable, herb, and flower seeds, and we grow and keep seeds for their distribution. So I would recommend like checking out True Love Seeds for models. But it's been really powerful learning the stories of the seeds, and that's one reason I really love True Love Seeds, is because they're very much about like what is the history inside of all of these seed varieties that have been selected and kept for generations. And I'll just mention some of the seed varieties that we grow that I think have powerful stories, like the Moya Mensing tomato, which was kept and saved by people who were imprisoned at a penitentiary in Pennsylvania, and they collaborated with like the cook to like save these seeds, and were able to like pass it on. So that's an example. There's also another tomato that's been saved from the Underground Railroad that we save here, the Plataiti tomato from Haiti, which is our ancestral homeland. And then we also save calendula and bee balm and peas and sweet Annie and some peppers. But all the seeds that we save, we send to True Love, and then they handle the distribution for us. With the exception of, we're also growing the Muncie black and white corn, which is the corn that's indigenous to the lands that we're on. And we're really blessed to enter into a friendship with Warren, who is a farmer and seed keeper on the Mohican reservation in Wisconsin. So this is like the original territories of the Stockbridge-Munsee Mohican Nation, who are now primarily in Wisconsin. And through that great distance, we've been doing a seed exchange. And Warren has entrusted us with some of this original seed, grateful for its return to its homeland. And we plant it here following the original instructions of how it's grown in these mounded hills and spiraling up to the center, and in a symbiotic relationship with the corn and the beans and the squash. And every year we gather up those seeds and we send them back to the Mohican Nation, so that we're growing the seed bank and like proliferating that amount of seed. And then we're able to also distribute some locally, and any of the profits that we make from selling that seed, we use as remittance, as a voluntary gift to the Mohican Nation to support their cultural work. So that I guess that would be an example of how we've done seed exchange through this relationship, which has been really meaningful. That's one of my favorite crops to tend is Anmilba, our Three Sisters garden here on the farm. And yes, encouraging more seed saving. You heard at the end of the poem, I shared every seed saved will set us free. And I really do believe that, preserving the biological and cultural diversity of our seeds has everything to do with our survival. So thank you for that question.
We got two more that came in, and if it hasn't already been addressed, are there any plans to open additional soul fire farms or any insight into any networking being done directly with other farms? Thanks.
Yeah, so we are the only soul fire farm, but we are happily part of a network of farms all across the nation, even across the globe. We're proud members of Via Campesina, a global network of farmers. And our model for growth is really about mimicking the growth of the forest. And instead of like a franchise model where it'd be like soul fire 1, 2, 3, and 4, so we really see ourselves as part of this interdependent movement that's growing. And our alumni have gone on to do such powerful work. Leah shouted out some in the keynote, like Percussion Farms and Catatumbo Farm and Love Fed New Haven, and on and on and on. And so while in no way are these projects replicas of soul fire, we feel like, we're part of a similar rhizome or taproot, in terms of what's inspiring us, the values that are guiding us. And this is really how we see our growth happening, and the message and the power of what's possible replicating is through both through our alumni network and through the partners that we work with, and really maintaining a relationship with some of our sibling farms like Wild Seed Community Farm, like Rocksteady Farm, like Rise and Root Farm, like Black Urban Growers, and more and more and more. And so we started forming like a mutual aid kind of support group for Northeast farmers of color. And that was the birth of NEFOC. And it really started as, how do we support each other through everything from isolation to crop damage, to aggregating our crops and our harvest. And NEFOC started as like these yearly or twice yearly gatherings where we would, figure out how to support each other more and be in relationship, to birthing this whole community land trust model, which has led to our regional work organizing for reparations and land backs to Indigenous people, and figuring out how to hold our land in commons and acquire more land for our land sovereignty and food sovereignty goals in the region. So that's how the growth is happening.
That is awesome. We got one more in the chat. Any words of wisdom for people just starting out in their food justice journey?
Ooh, so I'm wondering if you're starting out in growing food, or if you're starting out in being an activator and an advocate for food justice. So if you want to clarify, then I'll know how to direct my answer. Nice. Allison stepping in as an activator and an advocate. So I would get in touch, like do some listening first, like what's already happening in your communities that you belong to, that you're accountable to, and see how you can lend your voice, your energy, your resources, your brilliance to those initiatives. Like I warn all of us, myself included, can be like, you know, so visionary and like ready to jumpstart things, to not just go off and be like, oh, I got this great idea, let me start things. It's really about looking around to see like what already needs supporting, you know, some like legacy organizations being held on to by elders that need a fresh burst of energy, for example, you know. And so there is a list of BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color led food justice and land justice organizations and initiatives to support in that action plan, which is a good place to start. But also you may have even more intimate knowledge of what's going on like directly around you. But I would say that would be like a really good first step, and to continue to be in self-education and reflection and reading and conversation as we go. It's like a lifelong journey of understanding more that informs our work. And check out the action steps that I've shared, which is full of like hundreds of possible ways to step in. And I think really identifying what feels like your sphere of influence, like where you're able to leverage the most amount of power, which is often like where we have relationships, as well as where our like expertise and knowledge goes. And then of course the piece of like what lights us up, what inspires us. You know, we're gonna burn out quick if we're doing some work that we feel like we should be doing, but isn't really like aligned with our core. And so Leah quoted my niece Nishima, like the food system is the sum of everything it takes to get sunshine onto our plates, which means there's so many avenues of intervention, right? From the creation of our food to the distribution of our food to food access, so many things along the way. And so I encourage you and all of us to really be like finding that avenue that is the intersection between what our communities are asking for, what's really needed, and also what brings us joy, what's going to keep us motivated, and like finding that alignment so that we're really in it for the long haul.
All right. I don't see any more questions in the Q&A function or in the chat. But tons of support, tons of love. Yeah.
Beautiful.
This is amazing.
Thank you. And I know we have just like a couple minutes left. I would be happy to share a 2-minute poem with y'all, just so we can like close off with a little more creative inspiration. And let's see, I'm looking back at you, George. Does that feel like a good way to close, or do you have any
absolutely,
things
yeah.
that you want to say?
No, you got it. Close it up.
Okay, cool. Times are shifting. What are you witnessing? Kiss the ground is whispering, come, fall to your knees. I need your listening. Hush the mind so you can hear the signs as they reveal themselves. Slow down, we are running out of time. And can you feel yourself? No distractions, face our shadows so we can heal ourselves. Complete the circle. We have all we need around us, between us, and inside of us. Survivalists, we got our light and compass guiding us. Close your eyes. Can you see it? A divination as brilliant as our collective dreaming. The future will be the sum of all that we believed in and had the courage to achieve when there were no guarantees. We are descendants of a long line of freedom-seeking people who read the signs, communed with the unseen. We are carrying the torch connected to the source, one drop of light in the darkest night, a beacon guiding us north. Don't shrink, time to soar. We know one thing's for sure. If we get this right, we will never return to a normal, a moral that no longer serves. No going back, justice yearns to be born. No one's gonna save us. My love, it's our turn to birth the future our people in this earth deserve. We dedicate our lives to a world conducive to life. We commit our breath to a destiny where all of us can breathe. Ashe.
Naima Penniman, we are blessed that you were with us tonight. Thank you so much. And yeah, I really can't express the gratitude that we have that you were able to spend the hour with us tonight. This has been amazing, and we can't thank you enough.
Thank you, George. And thank you everyone for listening in. It's my honor to share this time with you. And let's make it meaningful by letting it move us and move us into greater action and awareness. I'm grateful to know that we're in this together. You give me hope. Thank you.
Thank you so much.